Growing up in South Africa, our history books told a very specific story. We learned about European kings and queens, explorers and empires. But Africa, our own continent, felt strangely absent. Sure, there were a few paragraphs about ancient Egypt, but what about the rest of this vast continent? What about the kingdoms and empires that rose and fell long before European powers arrived? It felt like someone had ripped out pages from our history books, leaving huge blank spaces where African stories should have been. We learned about the pyramids, but not about the Great Zimbabwe. We heard about the Roman Empire, but not about the Songhai Empire. It was as if Africa had existed in darkness, waiting for Europeans to bring the light of civilization. But something about that narrative never sat right with me. How could a continent so rich in culture, resources, and diversity have no history worth telling? It felt like a lie, a deliberate attempt to erase the achievements of an entire people. As I grew older, I began to discover the truth. I learned about the powerful African kingdoms that thrived for centuries, the brilliant scholars and artists who pushed the boundaries of human knowledge, and the courageous leaders who fought for their people's freedom. And I realized that the blank pages in my history books were not empty by accident. They were the result of a deliberate campaign to silence African voices and erase African excellence. The idea of Africa as a dark continent with no history is a lie. It was a lie invented by Europeans to justify colonialism, to make it seem like they were doing us a favor by conquering our lands and stealing our resources. They called Africa dark, not because it lacked light, but because they refused to see the light that was already there. European philosophers and explorers wrote books about Africa, filled with stories of savage tribes and uncivilized people. They ignored the complex societies, the advanced technology, and the rich cultures that they encountered. They needed to paint a picture of Africa as a backward and primitive place, a place that needed to be saved by European intervention. This false narrative was spread through books, newspapers, and even scientific journals. It was taught in schools and universities, shaping the way generations of people viewed Africa. And it worked. The lie of the dark continent took root in the minds of people all over the world, including many Africans themselves. This lie had devastating consequences. It stripped Africans of their history, their identity, and their self-worth. It created a power imbalance that justified centuries of exploitation and oppression, and it continues to cast a shadow over Africa today. Let's talk about Great Zimbabwe. This incredible city, built of stone without mortar, stood for centuries as a testament to African ingenuity and architectural genius. But when European explorers stumbled upon its ruins, they refused to believe that Africans could have built something so magnificent. They claimed it must have been the work of ancient Phoenicians or Egyptians, anyone but Africans. They couldn't accept that a primitive people could have created something so sophisticated. They literally couldn't see the truth right in front of their eyes. And then there's Timbuktu. This city was once a global center of learning, home to a renowned university and a vast library of manuscripts. Scholars from all over the world flocked to Timbuktu to study astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law. But this history too was buried, literally, by European colonizers. They looted the libraries, burned the manuscripts, and did everything they could to erase the legacy of Timbuktu's intellectual achievements. Why? Because a thriving center of African scholarship challenged their narrative of African inferiority. We've all heard of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the billionaires of our time. But have you heard of Mansa Musa? This 14th century emperor of Mali was so wealthy, his fortune is almost impossible to calculate by today's standards. He controlled the gold and salt trade across the Sahara Desert, making him one of the most powerful rulers in the world. Mansa Musa's fame spread far and wide. He embarked on a legendary pilgrimage to Mecca, taking with him thousands of servants, camels laden with gold, and enough wealth to literally shift the economies of the cities he passed through. His generosity was legendary, and his piety was admired throughout the Muslim world. But for centuries, his story was largely unknown outside of Africa. Why? Because Mansa Musa's wealth, power, and influence challenged the European narrative of African backwardness. He was a living, breathing testament to the fact that Africa had a long and glorious history, full of empires, innovations, and incredible individuals. Mansa Musa's story, like the stories of Great Zimbabwe, Timbuktu, and countless other African achievements, is a reminder that we need to reclaim our history. We need to rewrite the textbooks, challenge the stereotypes, and tell our own stories. It's time for the world to see Africa in all its complexity, its beauty, and its power. Let's share these stories. Let's celebrate our heroes. Let's reclaim our past and build a future where African excellence is recognized, celebrated, and honored.